Okay, what's up everyone, it's Goose, and today I slept less than half the recommended 8 hours. Today we're going over the new 5150 stealth model in the Fractal FM9 and comparing it with the stealth model, at least I think it's a stealth model, in the Quad Cortex. Previously, using some additional settings, we adjusted the base 6L6 model on the FM9, which is not a stealth model, to match the Quad Cortex. And for the most part, I think I was able to get the vibe of the stealth with that model with some minor adjustments. Since then, FRACTAL has actually released an actual stealth model officially, I guess more unofficially, and so it's time for them to do a rematch. First, let's do a quick recap of my previous video with a regular 6L6 5153 adjusted to match the Quad Cortex stealth model. So I think my adjustments actually made them pretty similar. And note that my goal was to make the knobs correspond as closely to each other. So those adjustments were things like input trim and power amp. Now that there's a real stealth model, all that work was kind of for nothing. But that also means we can do another comparison. Before we move on, if you like nerding out about guitar gear and other guitar related things, consider hitting like and subscribe. So today we'll be comparing both the blue and red channels that are modeled. For the blue channel, we'll be dialing in more of a rock tone, and for the red channel, we'll be dialing in a metal high gain tone. The guitar I'll be using is my Kiesel Osiris with a DiMarzio Illuminator in the bridge. Specifically for the high gain tones, we will also be running a Boss SD1 in front, and it'll be the modeled Boss SD1 on both of the units. As usual, each comparison will start with single notes, some really simple chords, and then actual riffs. And with that out of the way, let's get started with the rock tones on the blue channel. So my thoughts, the Quad Cortex has a little bit less gain on the blue channel, and as a result, the individual note weight is going to be just a slight bit thinner feeling. The Fractal model is a little less bright. It ends up actually sounding a little bit woofier down low. One of the things that Quad Cortex does that I like is that it has a little bit more bite on top. The lead bit that I played was a little bit cleaner and a little bit more in your face as a result. Some folks do kind of feel like that is a little bit more kind of harsh and sizzly. But I think it worked for that lead part. With the riff that had the arpeggiated chords in it, I think that Fractal does a better job with the note separation. So when you're going through the individual notes in the chord, you could hear them a lot clearer on the Fractal versus the Quad Cortex. But overall, I think these two are very similar. All the differences I mentioned are very minute, and you could definitely adjust them to match even better. Likely that the reference amps are just slightly different in terms of like unit variation. All right, let's move on to the red channel with some higher gain riffs. And on this one, I actually feel like they are a lot more different. My thoughts here, the Quad Cortex is a little bit more scooped in comparison to the Fractal. While the blue channel of the Fractal was a little bit woofier, we've seemed to kind of reversed in this comparison, where the Quad Cortex is actually a little bit bassier. When you play, you feel it too. It's a lot squishier when you dig into the strings. By comparison, the Fractal is a lot stiffer, and it can be a little bit stiffer feeling when you play. However, that fast lead passage sounded a lot more forward on the Fractal, and a little bit thinner on the Quad Cortex, so if you wanted a lead to stick out, the Fractal model will definitely push your leads forward a little bit better. However, the high end of the Quad Cortex actually has a little bit of snarl. Again, just like the blue channel, I think that the Quad Cortex just adds a little bit more sizzle up top. And I think a lot of Quad Cortex models end up doing that. But because of that, I think it still feels adequate for the faster riff at the end of the comparison, even though the Quad Cortex model is a lot bassier. Specifically between these two models, I feel like the low end is just hugely different between the two though, to the point where it just feels completely different to play. And so what is my conclusion between these two? My conclusion is I have no clue what the Quad Cortex model is based on now. Everything I've ever experienced in terms of a stealth has been more in line with the Fractal model. The stealth is supposed to have a tighter low end. A lot of people say you don't need a boost. And even though I did use a boost, I did have to crank the low end on the Fractal. Whereas if I were to have not pushed the low end that far on the dial on the Quad Cortex, I would feel like I still needed a boost. The stealth is supposed to have a tighter low end than any of the previous 5150s, while at the same time having more gain than the regular 6L6 5153. And so the QC model has gain that is on par with the stealth model in the Fractal, but the low end is almost more akin to what I remember from the base 6L6 non-stealth model on the Fractal. And it also doesn't help that Neural Sight really doesn't clarify it either. The model has the stealth S on it, whereas their sight just kind of says vaguely that it's a 6L6 5150. However, despite all this, I actually kind of like the quad cortex model. I think that in conversations about guitar gear, when we get caught up in terms of the accuracy of a model, we tend to forget that technically a digital model doesn't have the constraints of an analog tube amp. Many models such as the Line 6 Badonk, for example, or the Fractal FAS Moderns are made to smooth over the undesirable qualities of certain amps in real life. Qualities that are actually a result of things they can't do physically due to the circuitry of the amp. As I mentioned, the low end is so different between the two, but the quad cortex model actually fit my playing style a little bit better because it's just a squishier low end that I like. However, if you're looking for pure accuracy, definitely I have no doubt that the Fractal model is actually more accurate. But just like every other comparison I do, it's not about what sounds better, and accurate doesn't necessarily mean better. It's about what us as players are looking for. So while I might prefer a squishier feel, others might actually like the stiffer feel of the model in the Fractal. So let me know in the comments down below, do you prefer the squishier quad cortex model or the tighter Fractal model? And that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Later!
Fuel the Gear Wars.